I've said for a while that my kind of two pillars this year are safety and fun. Safety being number one, but obviously we still want to make sure we have some fun while we're doing it. We are working directly with the NFL to figure out exactly what policies and procedures need to be in place to make that number one safety work the best that it can. So as soon as we have that information, my goal is to share it with everybody because I don't want that to be a surprise. I want to set that expectation early. I want it to be clear. I want people to have time to read it, to know it, to understand it, to ask questions, and then really decide if they feel comfortable enough to continue.
Meet Lisa Urban, Director of the Community Ambassador Program at the upcoming Tampa Bay Super Bowl host committee. Ever wondered how one of the world's biggest events manages their volunteer management program? Well, wonder no more. On this episode of the podcast, we're privileged to get an inside step-by-step look into what it takes to deliver one of the most celebrated events globally. From the unique nature of sports commissions in the US and what the Super Bowl means from a community engagement point of view, through to how to recruit, screen and train over 10,000 volunteers. This podcast is packed full of tips and learnings for best practice volunteer engagement. As events globally are now forced to implement real changes to ensure that their staff, volunteers and participants feel safe from COVID-19, we also discuss the introduction of online training sessions and the importance of communication when it comes to COVID safe practices. This podcast was recorded remotely, so we do apologise for the broken audio at times. Here's hoping these podcasts can be recorded in person sooner rather than later. If this is your first time checking us out, the Engage Volunteer podcast aims to highlight the ways in which organisations and individuals are engaging with their communities to connect them to events and causes that they're passionate about. The best way to support the Engage Volunteer podcast is to click follow wherever you're listening today and tell your friends about us. We also really appreciate feedback on the podcast and would love to hear your thoughts. If you'd like to share your thoughts or you have someone in mind for us to interview, then please don't hesitate to get in touch via hello@rosterfy.com. Lisa Urban, thank you so much for joining us on the Engage Volunteer podcast. You've got an incredible journey and I'm really interested to hear more about it and what you're up to at the Super Bowl at the moment. So to kick us off, I'd love to hear about how it all started for you and how you got into working with people and now with volunteers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here and share my story. I always say it is the least linear path to be where I am today that you could probably have. So I graduated from college and did it what a lot of people do, and they go home and lived at home for a few months before I realized that was just not a good long-term solution. Moved down to Florida from Ohio to the Tampa area and worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car and made a great group of friends, which I'm thankful for, but that was just not the career path for me. And so I actually had a connection with the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Tampa, and I got hired on there and worked for them for 5 years. And the Tampa Sports Commission, Tampa Bay Sports Commission, shares space with Visit Tampa Bay, the CVB. And so when you're in an environment like that, when you have big events coming to town, it's all hands on deck, regardless of what your position is, what your status is, everyone just jumps in. So I had a lot of connection and exposure with the Sports Commission over those 5 years. I left that job back in 2015 and went on to do other things locally in Tampa, but stayed connected through the Sports Commission and was able to get involved with various things over those kind of 5 years. And then they mentioned that there was an opportunity to potentially help out with the Super Bowl. And of course, I was into that.
Awesome. Yeah, fair enough.
Thinking a little bit more like, I'll take an event and run an event or something like that. And then this position was available, and I kind of thought at the end of the day, if I don't put my name in the ring for consideration, I will definitely be disappointed. I'm fortunate enough to live very close to the stadium and in and near the downtown area, so I was like, I'm going to be in the middle of all this. Like, I got to at least try. Yeah. So I did that. Were you
confident of getting the job?
It worked.
Or was it a bit of a long shot?
I wasn't sure, as you are when you apply for any job, you never know who you're up against. You don't know how many people are in the candidate pool. You don't know what experience they are bringing to the table. I mean, knowing the staff at the Sports Commission as well as I do, and knowing how they work as an organization and what their kind of mantra is, I obviously felt like that gave me a good possibility of getting the job. But then, I don't have a super long resume of working with volunteers for years on end. So then there's that side of it too. So it was a little bit up in the air, and obviously worked out, and here I am.
Yeah, fantastic. And here we are. So good. And so great to be in amongst the middle of it and representing where you spent a lot of your life now in Tampa. So I guess that's how you sort of got into a bit of a zigzag of jobs and opportunities. And for maybe the international listeners not in the States, you mentioned working with the city and the sports council there. It is rather American thing that can you just explain the concept of the sports councils that are around the bigger cities in the US and how they attract events and how they all work together to pull them to life?
Yeah, it's awesome. It's such a cool process. And
it is.
I was able to kind of sit in the middle of them going through the bid cycle for future years over the last month. And it's been a fun refresher on how that all works. So essentially, a lot of what we do and what they do is the NCAA. So the college sports is really kind of the bread and butter for Sports Commission. And as a sports commission, what your direct competing market is, whether it's someone in your region or it's in another region, maybe it's a similar size city. So you kind of always know your direct competition. But what's really cool and what's really fun is to see how you can create, the bid and the packet and the meat and the potatoes to entice those people to want to come to your destination. So this year, everything was very different for the team and they did everything virtually. And to say they knocked it out of the park would be just such an understatement. They absolutely killed it. I mean, they did some really fun, innovative things with their presentation. That would normally be an in-person site visit. Then you'd travel to where the NCAA is and you would present to them. And so they had to be really creative and they did that and they won a ton of events coming up.
Yeah. Can you name a few of those events that are coming to town now following the Super Bowl?
We have a volleyball championship coming to town, I think for the first time. We have some men's basketball coming back. We have a women's Final Four coming back, and we have a Frozen Four coming back. So really, really excited about all those events. They're so fun, and it's so great to see the city kind of come together and support the effort of the Sports Commission, which ultimately is bringing tourists into the destination to enjoy those sporting events.
Yeah, and I think that's almost the unique nature of it is the bidding process that happens in the States, very competitive between the cities. Yeah. I'd love to dive a bit deeper into it if you wouldn't mind. Like, is it each year that these bidding processes happen, or is it every 4 years, or is it depending on sport? How's the structure work?
To be honest with you, I am not 100% sure. I wish I had Tony sitting here. He would know all the answers to these questions. He would be a great person to ask. But I think you have to be invited to bid for them, and then they give you kind of a range. So I know for like women's Final Four, it was one bid, but you could have won a potential of like 3 different years, multiple years if they saw that was a good option. So I know that one kind of better than the rest, but I'm not 100% sure exactly.
No problem at all. Very good. Well, look, I'd love to dive into now a bit of your journey for the Super Bowl and almost, if you don't mind, getting a little granular of the steps that you go through over what is really a 12-month volunteer recruitment program. Lots of different gates volunteers need to go through in terms of every step of the journey. If you wouldn't mind, just if you could start us in January 2020 and lead us up to the event time, that would be awesome.
Sure thing. Yeah. So started January 15th of 2020, had about enough time to prepare for the trip down to Miami. So we all went down to Miami at various times. I was fortunate enough to be there for about 8 days. Got to meet the squad down there and kind of be on the ground, be a volunteer, learn the process, see the different ins and outs of how everything worked, learn the Rosterfy platform a little bit, which was so great. And so I took a lot of notes, did a lot of things there, came back and was boots to the ground, ready to go. We were pumped up. I was working with the team to get everything in place to start building the website and figuring out the flow of the program. And in the background of that, we also were hosting WrestleMania. WrestleMania was going to happen
in April. In Tampa,
And so we were actually working with Rosterfy on that as well. So it was going to be kind of the dry run for the Super Bowl. I was like, this is great. I'm in the middle of this. I might as well help out. What a cool event. So we had gotten to the place with WrestleMania where we had background checks running. People were signing up for shifts and everything. And then about March 17th, we were all in the office and found out that that event was canceled after March Madness had been canceled, and it was just a snowball from there. So about March 17th, we were all sent home to work remotely. And in the beginning, my goal was to launch the registration platform for the Super Bowl, maybe the beginning of April. But given everything that was happening at that point, we didn't feel comfortable doing that.
Sure.
It was not the right environment to be out there in the community trying to get people to sign up for things that you didn't really have any sense what was going to happen.
Makes sense.
The next day, much less, 8 months from then. So it actually allowed me to take a lot of time to go through the backside of the Rosterfy site and just get everything in there the way I wanted it. Do email templates, do the flow, figure out exactly how I wanted it to be, figure out how we could condense the timeline and still accomplish our goals. And so, worked really closely with your team, and that was very helpful. And Tony and I connected regularly to make sure that we were kind of keeping in step. And so we did a soft launch to our partners. I think it was July 6th. And then the next week we did a launch to a lot of the colleges and universities that I was fortunate enough to make connections with in Miami. And I had maintained those connections kind of through that quarantine period. And then at the end of July 23rd, officially, we launched like the big kind of social media, everything's ready to go ahead and register. So that happened in July. And then I sort of started doing the community outreach and a lot of Zoom. Honestly, you're making connections and meeting people face to face as we do in 2020. So it works. It's not amazing, but it's definitely better than just the phone.
And was that mostly to universities, colleges, different community groups to try and introduce yourself and the program and really ultimately sell why you should come and get involved?
Yes, essentially it was. We had an intern back in March who did some great research for me, who got a list together of all the sport management programs. So not only did I have the people that I had made connections with and was given some information from the host committee in Miami, I honestly sent out a blind email to all the sport management programs and just said, hey, here's what I'm offering. Here's what we can do. Let's get in touch. And we did. And it was great. And it was a really productive situation. And everyone was very supportive and very willing to see what they could do to help out and still be involved, which was a very refreshing thing to experience after all those months of kind of uncertainty.
Yeah, I'm sure. And can you paint a picture for me how many volunteers you're hoping to recruit over the time period versus how many you actually need to execute a Super Bowl?
In typical years, your number is going to be 8,000 to 10,000 people is what they'll tell you. We need that many to run a successful Super Bowl. I think where it's the most difficult for us is just not knowing exactly what attrition will look like this year. I obviously hope that everyone who's involved is involved because they are excited and feel comfortable and feel safe. And I don't want anyone to feel not those things if they're participating. I think at this point, if we had to host the Super Bowl tomorrow, could we pull it off with the number of people that we have registered? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Would we take more? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just, there's not a finite number this year because we don't know when it comes down to it, how many people are going to feel comfortable showing up. And that's fine. It's not upsetting. It's not frustrating. Yeah. It's just what it is.
What it is. Yeah, correct. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's a really interesting one. Moving to the side a little here is you're clearly going to be getting more questions from volunteers this year, or maybe some more pushback than what other Super Bowls have experienced in the past. What are some things you're doing at the Super Bowl to make people feel comfortable and safe and confident?
Yeah. I've said for a while that my kind of two pillars this year are safety and fun. Safety being number one, but obviously we still want to make sure we have some fun while we're doing it. We are working directly with the NFL to figure out exactly what policies and procedures need to be in place to make that number one safety work the best that it can. So as soon as we have that information, my goal is to share it with everybody because I don't want that to be a surprise. I want to set that expectation early. I want it to be clear. I want people to have time to read it, to know it, to understand it, to ask questions, and then really decide if they feel comfortable enough to continue. I think that's the only way to have it be successful.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so we'll keep moving on the journey. So we've discussed the registration and I guess some of the questions that pop up through that process. What happens next?
So next, we needed to figure out who our captains were going to be. So our captains are the people that we trust to run kind of shifts as I can't physically be everywhere at once the week of the Super Bowl, sadly. But we narrowed down that field of candidates, which honestly, the response we got for people who wanted to be captain was amazing. It was incredible to see the community and just anybody who was interested in that position. So we did have to narrow down the field quite a bit to figure out who we were going to interview. So we did do captain interviews via Zoom. So I spent literally about 5 weeks of time all day, every day on Zoom. It was a lot. It's mentally very difficult to do that, but it was worth it. I have to say, I was incredibly impressed with the level of professionalism that was brought to the table with our group and just the passion and excitement that everybody has for Tampa. I think it was really fun to talk about with all the things. And meanwhile, all this was happening and the Tampa Bay Lightning were running towards a Stanley Cup win. So for us, that was like a huge thing, which was really fun to talk to the captain candidates about as the games were progressing and all of that. So it was just it was a lot, but it was a very fun time for us. So we were able to get that candidate pool narrowed down, and we have emailed everybody to ask kind of what their role preferences are going to be so that we can start the process of looking at where we stand with numbers and role preferences and what we need. And then soon we'll be sending out an email to our general ambassador group to see what their role preferences are, with the hope of releasing shift sign up a little earlier in the process than you probably normally would, just to give us an idea of where we are. And if we need to do more recruiting, we can pivot. If we feel like we're good, then we'll just keep on that path, kind
Makes
of
sense.
Getting stuff
What
built.
date are you looking at there? Is that a November timeline roughly of shift offers for a January or February event?
We're hoping for that. I say everything is so fluid that
For sure.
every time I write down a date, I think it changes. So my new best friend is my erasable pen because I have changed the dates many times, but kind of thinking about how the Thanksgiving holiday falls, which thankfully it is late this year for us, end of November, which is nice. So kind of trying to capture some of that prior to the Thanksgiving holiday so that we can get some trainings launched in the middle-ish part of December. So that's another change we're making this year. Instead of doing in-person training, we are going to do everything online because there was too many unknowns to try and figure out an in-person training. Plus, the way Rosterfy is built, honestly, it makes this whole process so easy to be able to upload trainings and assign them to different roles, and just that functionality is going to become my best friend.
I'm sure, yes. I think it's something we've kind of pushed forever, but this is now something that's pushed over the line to say that it's crucial to do that. So we're now at sort of the shift off of time, allowing people really, and your internal team, 2, maybe 3 months worth of, we're understanding how many people are interested in what roles. We're sort of at 75%, let's say. We need to now recruit an extra 25%. So through that process, once people have applied for their shifts or expressed interest, what is your actual mechanism of confirming them? Is it they apply, you screen, then go back to them? Or is it a matter of sort of auto schedule? How does the scheduling actually work?
Yeah, so it's going to be everyone's participation in our program is completely dependent on their passing a successful background check.
Yes.
So that process has started with the NFL. And so we're working with them very closely to get them run through the system. So essentially, once everyone signs up for the shifts and we're able to see it, we'll be confirming the shifts 100% once we get those background checks completed. So that probably won't happen until January, but at least we'll have an idea of how many we have filled and what percentages we sit at and where our holes are kind of before that time frame.
Makes sense. So people will be expressing interest in shifts, but then won't necessarily be confirmed onto them until January once the background check is complete.
Yep, exactly.
And through that period, you will be doing the online training for shift-specific training, not just a general induction to say this is what you broadly need to do to volunteer.
Yeah, I'm working really closely with the NFL on their Fans First customer service training, which will be great. I know they work with you guys on quite a few things. So I'm really excited to see what we can do there. And then also working with our Visit Tampa Bay services staff, who's going to create a Tampa-specific volunteer training just about the ins and outs of the city. Because as much as we do have people that are local that volunteer, we have a lot of people that come from other states that volunteer. So really excited about that presentation. And then obviously kind of running the day in the life of a volunteer. From when you park to when you leave at the end of the day, kind of what do you need to know? How is it going to flow? What's the process going to look like? et cetera. So that's kind of our model this year, if you will.
Makes sense. I like it. And we'll get to engagement in a second and what you're doing, especially with the college students there. But one thing we're picking up with a lot of major event volunteer programs is an element of engagement is actually the training and making people feel comfortable and empowered to do the job they're doing. How much do you take from that? And is that a focus for you to make sure there's an X percentage of people completing training and so on to give you confidence that people are actually engaged with your program?
Yeah, so I have an HR background. I have my PHR designation, and I am very passionate about training and onboarding. So
awesome.
I might go into like super HR nerd mode.
No, I love it. It's good to know.
I love this side of it, and I'm really excited that, the silver lining for me in 2020 is that I'm able to create this whole program and help organize and distribute it and make sure everyone has what they need to know. So very likely it's going to be something that is required of the individual before they're able to pick up their credential and uniform. So you're going to track that way. And then obviously with the reporting capabilities that we have, we can very easily see where people have a deficit and maybe need to beef up on things. But we're going to do that. And then, we'll talk about engagement a little bit. But one of the things we are going to do from a training perspective and an engagement perspective is offer some live fans first sessions in January in addition to the online training. So if people want to pop into those, they can do that. They're really fun. They do really fun, like little interactive quizzes and stuff. So that's definitely one thing we're doing for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Great to hear and great to see that HR background coming to life here. That's great. So yeah. I guess come January, once the background checks are done, shift offers are put out, that's probably a pretty intense time for you between the shift offers and confirmations and event time, giving yourself, a few weeks or a month in between that time, roughly?
As much as we possibly can. Yeah. I'd love to say, I'll have a full month, but there's a possibility things get delayed and training doesn't get dropped until the new year. And that's okay too. Like that's one of my plans. So we'll see what happens, but we'll have to do some of those kind of roll up your sleeve, nitty gritty things like getting the uniforms kits put together for pickup and orchestrating some of the pickup times and the shifts for that and getting that process all figured out. And then, moving into like a volunteer headquarters space will likely happen at some point in January as well. So it'll be a lot of moving pieces in that month that I'm
on top of those moving pieces would be the shift confirmation process from those volunteers, right? So it's great. You can tell them you've passed your check. We want you to work your role, but ultimately it's still over to the volunteer to confirm, say that, okay, thanks for confirming me. Yes, I'll be there. What is that actual process? Are they calling your head office? Are they doing it via the portal? What's the process for volunteers and you? Because there's maybe 8,000 of them and one of you. So how does that process work? Yeah,
we're definitely going to utilize the system for as much as we can. I call it my little admin assistant because it does all my administrative tasks for me with the help of Chris. When I call him or text him or email him and say, Chris, I can't figure this thing out. And 4 seconds later, he's like, I got it. Okay, cool. Thanks. But yeah, we will definitely be confirming everything through the system just for tracking purposes. And just, it's so nice once you have the shifts up there with the dashboard and you can very quickly see kind of where you stand and where you need to be and just all that. So yeah, we'll run it through there.
So it will be via the portal that people will still confirm their time. Yeah, I understand. And then you mentioned uniforms. So I guess through that registration process, you're capturing sizes and how does that relationship work with you and the uniform team or the person responsible? Because there's an ordering process, right? And then almost an event in itself of uniform pickup with 8,000 people. What's the uniform relationship between uniforms and the volunteer team?
Yeah, so I have not actually uploaded sizes just yet because we've been working out little pieces of the uniform for quite a while, but we're very close to feeling good about it and being able to capture that information. But everyone will have an opportunity to designate in the system what sizing they need and all of that. But when I came into the picture, they were already pretty far down the process with one of the companies to try and work out a sponsorship or some sort of deal. So that was already in the works. So that has happened. Everything's been ordered. Everything's in process of getting shipped over to us. So we're hopeful to get that done. But putting everything physically together, because they don't do that for you.
Yeah, sure. And then the uniform pickup would be almost the first shift, if you will, of the week. How does that process work? Do you invite people or do they just all turn up to the event of uniform pickup?
We're likely going to have a period of like 5 or 6 days where we'll have uniform pickup available. And we're probably going to do it to where a person can sign up for like 2 different windows of time if they're not 100% sure when they're able to make it, just so that we can make sure there's not too many people in a place at once. And then we can also make sure we staff that area enough. So that's probably how we're going to do it. So we're still working through logistics on exactly where that's going to occur, but it'll likely be just a shift in Rosterfy that you would go into, like an event, and you'd be able to pick what shift you want of that event to then come and pick it up.
Makes sense. And you may not, and this may be something you're still working on, but is there an element of any COVID safety or, gloves or face mask or anything that you're needing to plan for? Or is that still things you're working on?
We're definitely still working on them, but we're considering any and all options. Yeah. So there's literally nothing that's not on the list or not on the table of ways that we'll make sure that it's as safe and as organized as possible.
Awesome. Nice one. And then what does, if I was a volunteer, do I have to do a certain amount of shifts across? Because a lot of people think it's just Super Bowl, right? In a way, the day is almost one of the smaller days. So talk us through what the actual schedule looks like as a whole. Mm-hmm. How many shifts per day? How many locations? What does a Super Bowl volunteer program look like in real life?
For us, the real life Super Bowl week starts Friday, January 29th, and technically runs kind of through Monday, February the 8th, because you do have some residual like hotel shifts and airport shifts that Monday after the game as people are leaving. This year, for the first time ever, we are actually co-producing Super Bowl Experience. So in years past, there's been NFL Experience and Super Bowl Live. Yep. So now everything's under one umbrella, and it's called Super Bowl Experience. And it'll be the NFL Fan Festival, which will be housed in one of our parks downtown Tampa. So it's Julian B. Lane Park, beautiful new park, very cool. That's going to be your traditional like punt, pass, kick, see the Lombardi Trophy, do all of that stuff. On the other side of the river, we have a 2.7 mile long pedestrian river walk that runs all through downtown essentially. And there are like 6 parks that run along that river walk. Mm-hmm. And each park is going to have a different style of activation in it, from wellness activities to concerts to food to, there's a big NFL fan shop sponsored by Visa. And I should say the whole Super Bowl Experience is sponsored by Lowe's. So it's all under that umbrella, like you would have seen in years past. So we're really, really excited about that. There are, I think it's Monday and Tuesday of the week of, those parks are closed, so there is a little bit of rest. We also have people at the hotels, so they'll be at the hotels the full 10 days. And then there are all kinds of various events that happen in conjunction with the big events. I'm working very closely with the NFL to help them staff their events and just make sure that we have everyone where we need to be. So there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of different players on the stage there for that one. But it should be a really fun way to get kind of the whole of downtown Tampa involved in this rather than just like 1 or 2 pieces.
Yep, for sure.
Oh, and you do have to do 3 shifts, yes. And I worked really hard this year to make the shifts like 4 to 6 hours in length so that people have enough time to do a shift potentially in the morning and then go and do whatever they need to do in the afternoon. We have a lot of young professionals and working professionals in Tampa that help us with events. And so we're very conscious of the fact that a lot of them are going to be working.
Yeah, makes sense. So you mentioned 8,000 volunteers are required or so. Let's see what the number ends up being. But how does that number get spread across the week?
It ramps up for sure. So the Friday, January the 29th, and Saturday, January the 30th, and Sunday, January 31st are all going to be pretty busy. So Saturday, January 30th is actually Gasparilla Parade. So that's our Gasparilla Pirate Festival and Parade. It's like the 4th largest parade in the U.S.
Wow, okay.
Bring your best pirate impression, I guess, for that day. So it's already a big day in Tampa. So that's going to be a very busy day for sure. And then it kind of ramps back up the Thursday before the game. So, we'll see. Because of the way that programming is this year, with Monday and Tuesday being kind of the less program days, those are obviously the lowest in terms of shifts overall. It's pretty even kind of for the rest of the time.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. Cool. And if I can ask if there's like one objective of the volunteer program, or like why does the Super Bowl have a volunteer program? Is it to make people welcome to Tampa? Is it so that people know where to find the stadium? And is there one clear objective that's sort of overarching it all?
For me, I think it's just to spread the Tampa welcome and warmth to everyone that's coming to visit, because there are a lot of people who even maybe haven't been to the destination before or came the last time the Super Bowl was in town, which was in 2009. So the difference of Tampa from 2009 to 2021 is insane. So
Sure.
to be able to share that with everybody that's coming in to visit, I think is one of the biggest focuses, in addition to providing excellent customer service and just being that resource and that guide to enhance your experience. If you never set foot inside the stadium for the game, which not many people actually do, most people come in and enjoy the events, we want you to leave and still remember Tampa as a great destination and somewhere that you'd be interested in either coming back to or just spreading the word that we have a lot to offer that maybe people don't realize.
Yeah, that's why at the start of this podcast, I was really interested in that relationship with the Sports Council, because a lot of this is tourism based in terms of bringing people to your city and then for people to leave going, what a great city that is, not just what a great event I got to see. In our time in Houston for a previous Super Bowl, the volunteer program, I've never seen anything like it in terms of the passion that the volunteers had about the city and making sure everyone felt so welcome and knew where you were going, or this is a great restaurant, you got to try. I think it's a unique thing that in the US, people are so proud about where they're from and promoting that factor. So yeah, it's good to get that insight, Lisa. That's really interesting. So I guess that comes to event time. And one thing I really wanted to speak to you about was around the engagement. And for you, I know that you're pretty passionate about getting the colleges involved. Have you got any tips around volunteer engagement and how you bring people along for the journey? Because Super Bowl's a long journey. People can be involved with, yours is shorter given COVID, but sometimes up to 12 months, right? And to ultimately fill your roster and schedule by event time, it's a long time from the initial registration. What do you do to keep people engaged through that journey?
We've had some fun social media campaigns that we've been able to participate in, and our marketing team did a phenomenal job recognizing National Volunteer Day. And so we did a really fun campaign surrounding that, and we sent an email out kind of, hey, heads up, this is happening. And then the day of, we sent a whole toolkit on how to post on social media and just to show their pride for being involved in the program, which was a really big hit. And additionally, kind of coming up in the fall, it is my goal to try and do maybe some live like Q&A sessions or just some things to where people feel a little bit more connected. But at the very least, when we do release training videos and trainings, we are going to make sure to do like a welcome video and give people little snippets of the destination so that they're not feeling so much like they're at their computers reading PowerPoint presentations for 2 hours or something like that, because nobody likes that. But from a college perspective, I've stayed in touch with the professors. I've participated in several sport management meetings where I was able to present and ask questions in the community. I've gone to several virtual meetings. I've had a lot of follow-up conversations with them and just how can I be a resource to you as your employees are registering or as your students are registering. So that's been a really great one. I sent a lot of follow-up check-in emails throughout COVID, just during quarantine time. So people knew I was still here working hard for them. And I think that was really nice. Some of the connections I was able to make with professors during that period was nice because I think we were all kind of craving human interaction during that. And just to have someone to chat with that was a little bit outside your main network, but still understood what you were going through was really a nice time. So I think this year it's been a lot of emailing and a lot of Zooming and just social media, like all those kinds of things.
Yeah, sure. Makes sense. And you just touch on something is that a lot of the time these major events need the volunteers to do work and it feels like almost a one-way relationship sometimes that they're feeling a need that you have, where a lot of the time people forget and think about what the event is also giving back to those individuals as people and their need to connect and be involved with community. I'm not sure if you had any perspective on that or knowledge of why people feel like they need to connect or why people volunteer in the first place.
Throughout the kind of 5-week period that I did all the captain interviews, it kind of came to light a lot in those conversations, just how passionate everyone in Tampa Bay is about our area and how much they want to show it off and just the pride for the area that we have. So I think that's a lot of it. I mean, we traditionally have a huge volunteer base for every event that we do. I mean, we're so lucky to have everyone in the areas who are willing to help us out. But I think mostly it was just the pride that they have. And a lot of people really just want to get out and do stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're kind of at that place too, where people are like, yeah, I'm in, I'm ready. Let's do it. Sign me up for shifts now. Let's do it. So I do think there is some of that too.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. I mean, we could talk for probably 2 hours about the need for people to get back and be excited about events being back and doing whatever they can, right? Yeah. So hopefully that's on your side, people wanting to be there and be involved. So that's really nice. So at the end of each podcast, we have a couple of questions we wrap it up with. One, I might start with the first one being, working with volunteers and with large groups of people can provide some random situations, sometimes positive, negative. I mean, have you got a situation that really stands out to you across your career dealing with volunteers as a bit of a shining light at all?
Yeah, so back in 2017, we hosted the College Football National Championship game, which was really fun, just to have fans of two different teams in the city that wouldn't necessarily think of Tampa as a destination. I was fortunate enough to be running what we were calling Yacht Village. So our convention center is a river, which is a very unique location, and it's right down the river from a port where large cruise ships actually come and go and do the cruise thing. So we had the ability to create a yacht village, and I took time off from my job, and I was the person that managed that yacht village for the week. And it was a lot of, logistical things, getting ice for people and doing beer deliveries and all those fun things you would do for the week. But what was really cool was we ran a hospitality program in conjunction with that. And so I was the one who was managing the volunteers for that hospitality program. And so just being able to be literally in the middle of the fans and all the action in a really cool environment. You're right on the water. You have beautiful views of the skyline. I will say it was absolutely the coldest January we had in probably 5 years that year. So I was in literally winter boots on the docks because it was so cold, but it made it fun. Like, that was what we still talk about to this day. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it was so cold, but no one minded. That was what was so cool. And everything was just, there were, of course, hiccups along the way, as there always are.
Yep.
But it was nothing that stopped anything from happening.
Yep. So next question being, what does success look like for you as an individual, but also for, come March next year, what does success look like for the volunteer program?
Yeah, I have two kind of for me personally. My first one is going back to our colleges and universities and that HR background of mine. I love students.
Yeah,
awesome. And I love giving them the opportunity to help out and to learn something that's going to help them in their future. So at the very least, even if schools cannot participate in Tampa for whatever reason, the awareness that this type of event is out there and that host cities will look for this kind of support every year was a big deal to me. So getting just the awareness out to other groups and other universities and colleges that hadn't maybe done this before, would be one of the things. So if I ever hear from someone in years down the line that, hey, we participated because of something that you told us, like, that would be a huge deal to me.
Great.
And then I think for the program itself is to go back to those kind of two pillars I talked about in the beginning, the safety and the fun. So the safety is just so important this year. And I think the fun is just as important because everyone wants to get out of the house. Everyone wants to do something and they want to be interacting with people. And that's why. And if you don't have fun, then you're not going to come back for your next shift. And then you're just going to have a bad experience. And we don't want that. We want people to have a good experience, but we also want them to feel safe while they do it. So I think those are kind of my reason.
Awesome. Thank you.
The positive vibe there.
Yeah, big time. And then the last one is that today we've covered a lot about why you got into the career you're in and the journey you went through. I'm interested to understand why you still stay in the role and what it means to you and how you connect with the people you work with and why you're still doing the role you're doing.
Really enjoy working in a group and team atmosphere. And we have a saying in Tampa, Team Tampa Bay, and it's just so appropriate when you're talking about the group of individuals I get to work with. Mm-hmm. And I also really enjoy interacting with people. I mean, truthfully, as much as the volunteers enjoy it, I enjoy it just as much as they do. It's
awesome.
It's a really cool environment.
Yeah, that's great. Lisa, I really appreciate your time today. It's been a great journey to step by step go through what it looks like for a Super Bowl through to event time, and hear your story about connecting with college students and how you best engage with those people, and why you're so passionate about the career you're doing. So Lisa, thank you so much, and look forward to staying in touch, and all the best with the Super Bowl.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
That's great. Thanks so much. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to our very first episode of the Engage Volunteer podcast with Lisa Urban. What a treat it was to peek behind the curtains of one of the world's largest events and its volunteer program. If you enjoyed this one, then please don't hesitate to keep on listening to our very next podcast with the incredible Tracy O'Neill. With over 20 years of experience in managing volunteers, Tracy brings with her a wealth of knowledge when it comes to engaging your volunteers. In this podcast, Tracy and I chat about the important role volunteer managers play in creating incredible experiences for volunteers and the communities that they serve. We also discuss the challenges of making organisations appreciate just how important volunteers are as a resource to help organisations achieve their mission, and changing the narrative around labelling them as just volunteers. If you're enjoying the listen today, then the best way to keep in touch is to click follow on the Engage Volunteer podcast wherever you listen today, and tell your friends about us. We hope to catch you next time.